Okay, was that, as Mark Cowie suggested, more of the real Fraserburgh we saw there? What did he mean by that? Do you think it was that desire and grit and determination they showed?
He used the word desire. I think it's hard to fully put a finger on what he meant, I think, but I know that, like, even though since sort of the beginning of November time they've been on a decent run, like they only lost that one game against Turriff, I think, and then, you know, draw with Clach, which we were frustrated with. But even though they've been in a decent run, Mark's been saying for quite a while that he hasn't been happy with the performances, whether it's been lack of sort of chances created or lack of goals scored, or just maybe not the sort of, even though they've been getting results, not the intensity, I think, to their play that he would expect and that you would usually associate with Fraserburgh. And I think on Saturday, I still think they could have maybe done more in the final third, would be my opinion, because other than the sort of closing stages when they were chasing it, trying to get back into it, I didn't feel Ewan McDonald was overly tested in the Formartine goal. Like, he'd a couple of ones in the first half that were sort of straight at him that he held, and there was a couple header off target for Sargent and things like that, but I didn't feel there was, like, you know, he was having to make a lot of saves. But I could see where Mark was coming from in terms of, like, for 2-0, well, throughout the game I thought they were the sort of side that had more of the play in terms of, like, Formartine, although they looked, you know, fairly comfortable at times. Formartine had a lot of defending to do, and they asked a lot of questions with balls in behind him and things like that. And then once Fraserburgh got that first goal through Sean Butcher, like, the way they finished the game and finished strongly, and sort of that is more like what you would expect for Fraserburgh. And it was a good, you know, bit of battling quality from them to get something out of that game. And I would agree with Mark that they did deserve something out of it. It's kind of funny in that regard, because as I was saying, like, Fraserburgh had a lot of the play, but Formartine chiefly sort of through Adam Emsley, I thought, in the wide areas, and also Julian Wade, I thought they always carried that sort of threat when they got forward. Like, the first goal comes when they had a good spell, the sort of 5-10 minutes before half time, and then we saw, well, Ross Aitken saved the day for Fraserburgh with one really good break that Formartine had, and then they had another one, Mark Lawrence and Aaron Norris linking up, and then Wade scores. And, you know, Formartine always, even if they do have to defend for spells, they always ask questions, and they showed that again. But I felt the way the game panned out and the way both teams played and the way Fraserburgh came back, a point was probably about right, I would say, a point apiece.
I think we've discussed Adam Emsley before on the show, correct me if I'm wrong, viewers, but I think he signed a new Aberdeen contract over the past week until summer of 2026. He's on loan at Formartine this season. What have you made of him when you've seen him? Do you think he's got a big future in the game?
I think he has. I mean, it's obviously you're conscious maybe of building up these players, you know, too soon, if you know what I mean. But I think from what I've seen of him this season, the one thing you would say is that I don't think he'll be in the Highland League next season. Whether he's involved with the first team pool at Aberdeen or if he's out on loan, I think he'll be stepped up into the Scottish League. But he's almost sort of old-fashioned in a way for a winger, in terms of, like, he's right-footed and he'll play wide on the right, and he's quite happy. He can come inside as well, but he's quite happy to just try and go outside the fullback all the time, and puts in good crosses. And I mean, well, first goal was a good cross. Graham Rodger had one before that as well, where could have scored from as well. And he's just a live wire, and with that sort of pace and his trickery, he'll always cause problems. And I mean, in fairness, he was sort of playing up against Willie West and Ryan Cowie sort of down that side, and I thought, in fairness to them, they did well as well. But he's always, in any game I've seen him, Emsley, he always asks questions of the opposition backline. I think he is somebody that in full-time football you would say probably has a bright future. And I was going to mention as well, there's one of the players there, Willie West, with him scoring, he's now, I believe, above Graham Johnston in Fraserburgh's all-time top scorers list with 169 goals, so I think he's third on their all-time appearances and fourth on goals, and top in terms of medals, senior medals won for the club. So it sort of seems like every so often with Willie there's just more sort of landmarks that he reaches.
Yeah, not bad for somebody that, has spent a reasonable period of his career playing in defence and other positions.
Well, that's it. He's kind of he said after the game he sort of had a shotty up front, shotty in midfield, and a shotty at the back. So aye.
Stuart Anderson, the Formartine United manager, I've noticed him saying after the game he doesn't look at the Breedon Highland League table, so this will be informative if he's tuning in for this bit, I'd hope. After the weekend's results, Formartine are now 9 points off leaders Brechin, having played the same amount of games. Is that too far back?
I would be inclined to say yes, but by the same token, if they could, it's like one of these, if it's a big if, but if Formartine could win, I think they've got 13 games remaining. If they could win all of them, I think that would give them 85 points, which would certainly have you quite close to it. I would potentially, but it's obviously the big if. The other thing that probably counts against them a wee bit is they don't have Brechin to play again, because if they had Brechin to play again and you could win that game, that obviously pulls you in closer. So, but Brechin obviously do have other difficult games to play, but I think Saturday's result in that game is maybe sort of shows how it could pan out a wee bit in terms of, there's Formartine and Fraserburgh, two good teams, and they've really cut each other's throats by drawing. Like, a draw didn't help either. I mean, Mark Coweed said before the game, and he said it again after, that he thinks they're out of it, and I would agree, although they'll clearly still have a say in it with the games they've got to play. But that sort of shows for me, I think, how it, obviously there's other teams, Buckie, Brora, and that will, Banks ID clearly, that all will feel they can challenge and they'll have a say. But in the sort of head-to-heads, if you get a few draws, or maybe there's not one team out of the challengers that sort of goes and wins 3 or 4 of those head-to-head encounters between the top 6, everyone will just sort of cut each other's throats a wee bit. In Brechin, if they can keep winning the games you would expect them to win, they could go on and win it, I wouldn't say pretty comfortably, but sort of more comfortably than certainly obviously like last season and how it was the season before that as well.
Just briefly, because we haven't discussed the incidents, potential handball in the penalty area for Martin Stuart Smith in the first half, and
early on,
and
12
also
minutes.
Graham Rogers' second booking reasonably late on for a coming together / high foot with Keenan Simpson, the Brock defender. What do you think of them?
With a handball, I think I would say, on the balance of it, I think the referee has got it right. I mean, I have a great degree of sympathy with the officials here, because when you watch this, if you've watched the highlights, when you watch this at full speed, it's so hard to tell for definite. Like, it looks like it could have come off Stuart Smith's arm. We've got the advantage of that angle from behind the goal, where it looks to me like it's more off his face. It maybe does brush his arm, and you can say, oh, well, his arm's up, but it is tucked in sort of to his body, even though it is up. But I would be inclined to sort of, maybe there is a wee bit of contact with the arm, but it looks, I've watched it, and it looks that behind the goal one to me, it clearly comes off his face, certainly, and you see Stuart, I think, rubbing his nose afterwards. So I would say with that one, I think the referee got it right, and it's one of them, I don't know from Lewis Brown's position how clear a view he's got of it, but I would also say if there's doubt and you can't be sure, and even now I'm probably still doubtful of like what it definitely comes off.
You can't give it.
You can't, if there's doubt, you can't give it. So I'd say on the balance, you couldn't blame him for that. This Graham Rogers second booking, I can understand why he's booked, because it is he sort of comes round and catches Keenan Simpson and he trips. But I do have a lot of sympathy for Graham Rogers, because there's no intent to foul. Like, if you see it, the ball's sort of coming over his head and his eyes are on the ball the whole way, and he's just turned and he doesn't know until it's too late that Kieran Simpson's there to
He's
head
going to take the ball down
and
with
it's
his foot.
aye, he was going to control it. So it's like I can understand why he booked him, and it's one of them where if he hadn't been booked already, if he, you know what I mean, if he hadn't been booked already, people might have gone, oh, yellow card, shrugged their shoulders, and you move on. But it's because he's already been booked and it's a sending off that it's maybe causes an issue. But I could understand. I had sympathy with Graham Rodger, but I could understand why the referee booked him. I mean, good thing to an extent is that at that stage of the game it didn't define the outcome of the game, but obviously for Martin they're missing Graham Rodger for next Saturday, which isn't good for them, and I could understand as well why they'd be frustrated with that.
Okay, well, I think that's enough time spent on the first game, so let's move on to game number 2 from Saturday that we filmed. It's Lossiemouth against Strathspey Thistle. Okay, Robert McCormack had that down as a real missed opportunity for Strathspey. He said that it's another game that we were the better team and lost, and I don't think anyone would argue we weren't the better team. So to come away after getting beat is frustrating. I don't actually think from our highlights, Callum, and I say our highlights, that the Strathspey were miles better than Lossie or anything. I thought, again, going by just our package, it looked quite even, but I'll concede it was a tight game that Strathspey were involved in again, and another tight game that they didn't take anything from.
I think obviously we've seen sort of 6 minutes or whatever it was, and I thought in terms of chances it was quite even, but over 90 minutes, which Robert's obviously watched, Strathspey could have been the better team. And I wouldn't, I'm not in a position to dispute his opinion, and I can see where he's coming from in terms of that's another decent Strathspey performance and they've taken nothing from it. And at this stage of the season now, with the situation they're in, it's points rather than performances that they really need. Like 7 points adrift at the bottom of the league. Keith are 17th, they've got 2 games in hand. Strathspey, I think 13 games left, and I'm looking now, they play the 4 sides directly above them, which is Wick, Keith, Clark, Vale, Wick. They've got those 4 teams to play. In the other games they've got, it's like Buckie twice, Fraserburgh twice, I think, Brora, Nairn, Huntly, Locos, Turriff. So it's hard to see them getting many points for those games. So those 4 games against the sides around them, realistically, to have a chance of not finishing bottom, I'd feel they need 10 or 12 points from those 4 games. So that's probably where a lot of the frustration comes from on Saturday as well, because that was a game they were in, a game they could have taken something from, and they haven't. For Lossie, in fairness, I mean, they're on to 21 points now, just 6 behind last season's total, and 12 games to go, I think. So it's like if they could put, say, another 10-12 points on the board, that's a good season, a season of progress for Lossie, and continue to be strong at home. Like, of their 21 points, 16 of them being at Grant Park, and good for a side like Lossie. I've said it loads, but it's like good home form makes a big difference, and they've had that this season.
Frank McGettrick's first season as well. Be good to increase their points tally from the previous campaign. I thought Lossie's opener, I thought the pass was sumptuous.
That's a bit of class that Ryan Farker brings, is that he can, but if he gets the opportunity, he can unlock defences with passes like that. But it's what helps him as well is players like Ross Morrison, who scored, and I mean Dylan Lawrence as well. They're willing runners in behind and give you that option. Like Ross Morrison, especially sort of over 10-15 yards, is lightning quick. And if you've got somebody with Ryan Farker sort of quality on the ball, it's a great advantage to have somebody that you can sort of tee up in behind, if it really. I
almost gave you the who's the fastest player in the Highland League unanswerable question there after last week's tall one. Anyway, do we give away the answer that we think we've come to?
The tall one, well, Kyle Dolling was the shout from one of the other contenders.
From Lee Fraser, so that's as good a person as anyone to judge. We filmed for the second time in 2 weeks a second yellow card and a sending off for time wasting at a throw-in. What was your take on this one? And is there is there an official time limit on these things
Well,
that players are like to take?
I don't know if there is an official time limit. The time that Jared Kennedy has the ball in his hands and he's actually at the line in a position to take the throw is 7 or 8 seconds. You could maybe argue we don't quite see it in the shot how he goes to get the ball, and we also don't see where the referee is and if he's telling him to hurry up. But it's like maybe he's taking into account the time Jared took to get the ball and get in a position, because that was maybe 6 or 7 seconds. But I would still, as I said with the Willie West one, I would still think it's harsh. Like from the view we've got in the audio, there's not really any signs that he's been told to hurry up either, which I kind of think is like, it's like, to me, I think you're due a warning of like, you're wasting time here, hurry up, and basically go like that and go like, it will be added, you know what I mean? And then next time, if it's in a similar situation, then maybe you do book him. But I still find myself thinking that was sort of needless. Although the big difference maybe compared with the Fraserburgh Wick one, is obviously the state of the game. It was close, and you did see the Strathspey players sort of saying how long's he taken, but I still think it could have been handled in a way where time isn't lost, the game is sped up, and the player isn't sent off. But maybe I'm in the wrong with that, but I still thought it was a poor decision for me.
As you say though, we don't see what's going on off camera. Maybe Jared Kennedy's off at the side, doing the Maradona header, keep you up. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to Saturday's other games. We'll start with Inverurie Locos 0, Brechin City 2. The leaders, goals coming from Danny Handling early on, and then Mark Scott getting the second after the break. It sounded like at 1-0, Jamie McCabe in the Brechin goal maybe prevented an equaliser from Locos. Dean Donaldson also talked about there being a hint of offside, which I haven't seen the footage, certainly, for both Brechin goals. But it's just, again, isn't it? It's Brechin finding a way to get it done. I think Dean Donaldson as well talked about the fact that one of Brechin's strengths is they've got quite a few sort of former full-time old sort of heads in their team that are quite crucial in games like this.
They've got a good mixture of youth and experience, really, but I think the key thing Brechin have got is they've got you would have to say, I would say they've got the best defence in the league, and their defensive record's that good. I mean, they've conceded 12 league goals this season, and they've won 7 games in the bounce, and in that run they've only conceded 2 goals. So that if you're always keeping things quiet, limiting your opponent's chances of scoring a goal, then you've always got a great chance of winning games, and that's what they keep doing, and that's what's so impressive. And is maybe in certain games this season, it's maybe been where they haven't slipped up, where maybe other teams have, is just because they've got that, they're able to keep clean sheet after clean sheet, and that's ultimately making a big difference, and probably is why they're, as much as they carry a lot of threat at the other end, it's probably as much as anything why they're top of the division. And it's hard to, at the moment, it's like, feels like they could just keep going and going, but obviously this coming Saturday they're playing Buckie at Glebe Park, which is a massive game. It's clearly one, if Buckie were to win, it opens things up a bit, but right now, Brechin, they're looking pretty imperious form. Fairness, credit to Locos, they competed quite well, and no disgrace in the scoreline, and they'll probably take quite a lot out of it. But I mean, Brechin, especially with getting an early goal, they've gone on and they've done the job well.
Banks D 4, Devon Vale 1. I think D remain 4 points behind Brechin, haven't played a game more. It sounded what happened in this game a little bit was Jamie McClellan scores the opener for Devon Vale, and an element of poking the bear perhaps, but it sounded like they then didn't defend particularly well, and if you do that against Banks of D, chances are you're going to concede quite a few goals. It sounded like they might have conceded a bit more than they did in the end.
Well, the thing is with Banks of D, they've got so many. That's probably what impresses me most about them, is the sort of sheer number of options and players they can bring in who are capable of scoring. Like, you've got Lachie McLeod, Ethan Cairns, Gary Wood. In terms of strikers, Mark Alexander as well can play up there, and then midfielders Kane Winton, Mark Gilmore, Hamish McLeod, Chris Ancinazzi. There's so many threats within their sort of midfield and forward areas that even if they lose the first goal, which they've done in a few games this season, doesn't really perturb them much, because they'll create chances, and that's what they've done on Saturday. And I mean, they've won their last 5 games in the league now, Banks Adi, keeping themselves right in the mix, and that's all you can ask of them. That's all they can do. And I mean, with the games remaining for both themselves and Brechin, there could be twists and turns. They've still got to play each other at Glebe Park as well, so certainly at this stage Banks Adi are in a good position. Still just lost one. I mean, there's a few of the draws they've had they've probably still rue. Still only lost once this season, so in the league, so they're in a good place. Devon Vale shades a wee bit maybe a Wednesday in the Aberdeenshire Cup. They were in front against Buckie, couldn't hold the lead. Similar story there, but Jamie McClellan has been, whether it's been in midfield or defence, he has been quite a bright spark for them this season, and getting on the score sheet again on Saturday's another sort of good thing for him.
Just to clear it up, these goals came from Kane Winton, Hamish McLeod and Ethan Cairns in the first half, before Lachie McLeod made it 4-1 after the interval. Buckie Thistle 3, Rothes 1. Now, this was Richard Hastings' first game in charge of Rothes. He hadn't had a training session with his new team. That was cancelled due to the weather at the end of last week, his first opportunity. Despite that, Gary Kerr had Rothes in front in the game, and it sounded like they could have scored more, or there were generally more promising signs for them before Josh Peters netted before the break, levelled things up. It sounded like there might have been a bit of a half-time rocket for Buckie Thistle before Peters went on to score 2 more and complete his hat-trick in the second period. Graham said it was the angriest he'd been at half-time for a wee while.
That's interesting, but although he maintains that he doesn't, he's calmer now at half time. But sometimes you maybe need to go to that, but I think it's clear obviously that when he does show his frustration, that he gets a tune out of his players, because they've come out and won, which is the main thing for their point of view, and having lost a week ago in the league to Nairn, getting back to winning ways was important for Buckie, and they've done that. And it's Rothes, even when Ross Jack were there, they were always sort of seem to prove tricky opposition for Buckie, and they've been a good side. And then you factor in new manager and maybe a bit of the bounce, as they speak about. That was on paper far from an easy game for Buckie, and they've come through it. And I mean, Josh Peters back in the starting 11, maybe after a wee injury niggle, and back doing what he does best, and delivering the goals they needed. And that's really what Buckie are after right now. If you're them, I don't think you can look at the table. You just keep trying to box off the wins and see where you are in another month's time. But
Graham, I suppose when you read his quote that he had to remind our lads that it's us who are meant to be going for the league, there is a sense with them having, was last weekend they dropped points, wasn't it? Like, they're 15 points behind, they've got 5 games in hand. They might need to win all of those, and they will need to be relentless. They can't really afford to have sort of more or too many more sort of days where they're slightly off it, because it could cost them the whole thing.
Alright, well, you wouldn't think so, but they've shown time and again that they're good, even if they've a bad 45 minutes or a bad hour. They've shown numerous occasions that they can find a way out of it and find a way to win, which is a good trait to have. And it's seen the amount of late goals they've scored over this season and the past couple of seasons. So I don't think anybody from a Buckie perspective would be too concerned by their performance at the weekend.
Rothes, they obviously appointed Richard Hastings. There's 3 months of the season left. Rothes have talked to, like, the chairman's talked about that they want to be, pushing back up the way, building on maybe the success they've had in recent seasons. Is the next wee while just about him assessing things ahead of the summer and probably reasonably significant changes to come?
Well, I think maybe it's about Richard assessing things and also trying to implement how he sort of wants them to play or what he's expecting from them. I do think Rothes are at a bit of a crossroads, because in terms of that aspiration to be back up in the top 6 as they were and lifting cups and things, to do that, I think it's sort of probably going down one of either two ways, where they maybe look at getting more young players who, whether it's coming out of full time or that they bring through themselves, or sort of younger players, and then do they try and build for 2, 3, 4 years to get to that level, or are they maybe looking to get sort of the best of the young players they can, but then more established players coming in to sort of take them there more quickly. I do think they've still got in terms of what they have there just now, they've still got a good squad, but I mean, I know there's some players maybe out of contract in the summer. Remains to be seen whether they stay, and also some players who've been good players for Rothes maybe just not quite hitting the levels that they have in the past, and it's like, can you get more out of them again, or do they move on? It's interesting to see how it pans out, particularly in the summer, in terms of what they do going forward, because as I said, I think it's like there's, depending on maybe what Richard Hastings feels he can get out of that squad and what they can do in the transfer market, there's sort of multiple roads they could end up going down.
Okay, final game to discuss from Saturday that went ahead. Turriff United 4, Huntly 0. Turriff now above Huntly, up to 7th place in the table, as I understand it. This to me, Callum, and I've seen a little bit of it, but it sounded very much like a game where Huntly were slack, and it was a perfect storm of Turriff also being lethal on the day.
It seemed to be. I mean, both managers sort of touched on that really. Turriff were really clinical when their chances came along, and Colin Charlesworth felt Huntly got punished for every mistake they made. I think really if Huntly looking at the goals back, they'd feel, for probably all 4 of them, but certainly a couple of them, the defending was quite poor. But I mean, Turriff again, it's like Ewan Clark, John Allen, Rhys McEwen as a front 3. They're a handful, cause any team problems on their day, and they've done that on Saturday. It's 4 wins out of 5 for Turriff. The league got back to winning ways after that narrow loss to Fairmartin. They're now they've already beaten last season's tally, 3 points ahead of that, 39 points now. So it's just really everything at Turriff United at the moment is very, very positive, and I think for them you're just looking for it to continue between now and the end of the season and see where that takes you. For Huntly, sort of, they're just recent games probably sum it up a wee bit. I mean, like they beat Devonvale 5-1, scored 4 against Clach, but then they've also conceded 4 on Saturday, and I think their last 6 league games it's 3 wins, 3 losses, which probably shows what it's like for them at the moment, a bit up and down. But again, it's like on their day, if they play well, they can beat anybody, but clearly on Saturday they weren't at their best.
Yep. Okay, just to clarify the goals, Rhys McEwen scored the opener for Turriff, Andy Watt. And
Dylan Stewart, I think, was the second goal.
Dylan Stewart with the second goal, and then Ewan Clark scored a double. That's the first goal I've got wrong, the scorer this week. Alright, well, let's have a look at the Breedon Highland League standings as they are now following the weekend's action. Alright, that's it for this week's edition of Highland League Weekly. Thanks for watching, thanks to Callum for being here as well. Hope you've enjoyed the show. If you have, there's plenty more to come in the weeks and months ahead, including more highlights, more features and analysis. Until we see you next, please follow us on social media. We're on X, we've got a Facebook group named Highland League Weekly that you can join. We're also on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube for more Highland League news from the Press and Journal. You can sign up for Highland League newsletters, there's a link to do that below this video. The aforementioned next time we see you will be on Thursday in a sense, because we've got Highland League Weekly Extra to film on Wednesday night. What's the game, Callum?
Brora Rangers versus Buckie Thistle.
Brora Rangers against Buckie Thistle, so it'll be the best of the action and reaction from what is a pretty significant clash in the title race. But yes, until then, please enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching.